Without, the night was cold and wet, but in the small parlor of Laburnum Villa, the blinds were drawn and the fire burned brightly. Mr. and Mrs. White sat with their son Herbert around the fire, playing chess. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked loudly in the quiet room. "I don't know what has come over me," said Mr. White, "but I feel an odd desire to try a new experiment tonight." "What experiment?" asked Mrs. White. "I saw an old friend of mine today," said Mr. White, "who brought with him something unusual. Something that is said to grant 3 wishes. A monkey's paw." The 3 of them exchanged skeptical glances, but curiosity flickered in their eyes. Herbert laughed lightly. "A monkey's paw that grants wishes? That's absurd." Mr. White held up the small, shriveled paw. It looked harmless enough, but there was a strange weight to it, as if it carried secrets too dark to imagine. "Well," said Mr. White, "perhaps we'll see if it really works. Only 3 wishes are allowed, and many say it's dangerous to interfere with fate. But just imagine." The fire crackled, the wind howled outside, and none of them could have guessed that their lives were about to change forever. The next morning, the Whites awoke to a bright, cold day. Mr. White held the monkey's paw carefully in his hand, turning it over and over, as if the object itself might speak. "I wonder," he said aloud, "what would happen if we actually made a wish?" Mrs. White frowned. "I don't know, dear. It seems silly. A thing like that could only bring trouble." Herbert leaned forward, eyes gleaming with mischief. "Why not? Just 1 wish. Nothing bad can happen, can it?" Mr. White held the paw tightly and whispered, "I wish for 200 pounds. Nothing happened at first. The room remained silent except for the ticking clock. But Mr. White noticed a strange warmth in his hand, as if the paw were alive, and the hairs on his neck stood on end. The day passed uneventfully, and the Whites almost forgot the incident. But that evening, there was a knock at the door. A man from the local factory stood there, face solemn, holding a letter. "I'm sorry to inform you," he said, "your son, Herbert, has had an accident at the mill. Compensation has been arranged." Mr. and Mrs. White froze, staring at one another. The sum in the letter was exactly 200 pounds. The monkey's paw lay on the table, small and harmless looking, yet it had granted its wish, in the most terrible way imaginable. Mrs. White whispered, We must try to undo this. We must make another wish." Herbert's empty chair seemed to loom in the room. Shadows flickered against the walls as the family stared at the cursed paw. Mr. White hesitated. He feared what might come next, but he knew the paw had more power than they could ever imagine. The house was silent. The fire had gone out, and Mrs. White sat by the window, pale and motionless. Outside, the wind cried softly against the glass. Mr. White still held the monkey's paw. His eyes were empty, his hands trembling. "I could wish him back," whispered Mrs. White. "No," said Mr. White sharply. "He's been gone for over a week. We don't know what we'd bring back." "Please," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Wish for my boy. Wish him back to me." Mr. White lifted the paw once more. His voice shook. "I wish my son alive again." Nothing happened. The room was still. Only the clock ticked. Hours passed. Then, somewhere in the darkness outside, there came a slow, heavy knock. Mrs. White gasped and ran to the door. "It's him. It's Herbert," she cried. "Let me open it." Mr. White grabbed her arm. "Don't open it. You don't know what's out there." She struggled free. "It's my son. Let me see him." The knocking grew louder, echoing through the house. Mr. White searched frantically for the paw. He held it up in shaking hands. "I wish for him to go away." The knocking stopped. Mrs. White opened the door and found nothing but darkness and the empty road beyond. The wind blew gently through the doorway. Mr. White dropped the paw and took his wife's hand. The curse had ended, but at a terrible cost. The night grew quiet once again. The wind had tired itself, and the house stood still, cold and heavy with grief. Mrs. White sat on the floor near the open door, her face turned toward the emptiness outside. Mr. White closed the door slowly and locked it, his hand shaking against the wood. He turned to her and spoke in a weak, trembling voice. "It's over now." But she didn't answer. Her eyes stared through him, lost in the dark. For days they didn't speak much. The house felt hollow, like a shell echoing with memories. The clock still ticked, marking every second they'd lost. Sometimes at night, Mr. White would wake to the faint sound of footsteps in the hall, soft, dragging, almost human. He would lie frozen, listening, too afraid to move or breathe. But each morning, the sound would vanish with the first light. He began to wonder if the curse truly ended, or if something unseen had stayed behind. One evening, as the wind pressed against the windows, Mrs. White finally spoke. "Do you ever hear him?" Mr. White froze. He didn't answer. "I hear him sometimes," she said softly, "calling for me from the road." Mr. White's throat tightened. He looked toward the door, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw a shadow move across the glass. He closed his eyes and whispered, "It's just the wind, only the wind." But deep down, he knew the truth. Some wishes never really die. They wait, patient, quiet, unseen, for another hand to touch the paw. Weeks passed. The Whites spoke little. The house seemed smaller, older, as if grief itself had settled into the walls. One gray morning, Mr. White walked to the small table near the fireplace. The monkey's paw still rested there, stiff and lifeless. He picked it up, turning it slowly in his hands. The fur was rough, the fingers cold. He stared at it for a long time, remembering the 3 wishes that had broken everything they loved. Then, with a heavy breath, he placed it inside a small box and nailed it shut. He buried the box behind the garden, beneath the withered tree where Herbert once played as a child. The earth closed over it like a secret, silent, final, forgotten. Years later, the house was sold to another family. A young couple moved in with their little daughter. The girl liked to play in the garden, running between the trees, laughing as the wind danced through her hair. One day, she tripped over something hard buried in the soil. She brushed away the dirt and found a small wooden box. Inside was a dried, twisted paw. She smiled and carried it inside. And as the wind rose again that night, somewhere in the darkness, 3 faint knocks echoed through the house. The story had begun once more. The night was quiet. Only the whisper of wind moved through the open window. The little girl held the paw in her small hands, curious and unafraid. "Make a wish," she whispered to herself. Her mother laughed softly from the other room. "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" "The little hand says I can have 3 wishes." The mother smiled, thinking it was a toy. "Oh, really? Then wish for a sunny morning." The girl closed her eyes. "I wish for my grandpa to come visit." The wind outside stopped. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The girl giggled and placed the paw on her bedside table. At the same moment, far away, an old wooden box cracked open beneath the garden soil. The earth shifted just slightly, as if something had moved beneath it. The little girl fell asleep, dreaming of footsteps in the hallway. Footsteps that grew closer and closer, until a gentle knock echoed on her door. The night was thick with silence when Mr. White woke suddenly. He didn't know what had disturbed him. Perhaps the wind, or perhaps the faint sound that had seemed for a moment like footsteps. He turned his head toward the window. The curtains fluttered lightly in the cold breeze. Mrs. White was still awake, her eyes red and wide open, staring at the ceiling. "It's been 2 days since," she murmured. 2 days, and nothing." "Don't start again," said Mr. White quietly. "Please." But she only sat up suddenly, her voice trembling. "It's the paw. Maybe you didn't wish hard enough." "I did what you asked," he said. "Do you think I want this?" The wind blew harder, shaking the windows. And then there was a knock, a slow, heavy knock at the door. Both froze. Mrs. White's lips parted in disbelief. "Herbert," she breathed. Mr. White turned white as a sheet. No, it can't be." The knock came again, louder this time. 3 dull thuds that echoed through the cold air. Mrs. White jumped up, running toward the stairs. "It's him. It's Herbert. Don't you hear it?" "Wait!" Mr. White shouted, grabbing her arm. "Don't open it." But she tore free and ran to the door, fumbling at the bolts with shaking hands. Mr. White stumbled toward the table, his trembling hands searching for the monkey's paw. Please let it be gone."